Oregon Impact was originally formed to administer the DUI Victims Impact Panels here in Clackamas County, and it still does that. It provides 21 presentations each year for court-ordered offenders, including sessions geared exclusively for youth and for those whose primary language is Spanish, along with one presentation every month for other adults. But it is much more than that today. It extends the outreach into all areas of Oregon and Southwest Washington, offering programs to keep everyone who travels on our roads safe. Now, there was a time when DUI was by far the major reason drivers didn't pay attention when they were driving. And it is still a major reason. But thanks to technology, it's now not the only reason. Distracted driving is taking lives as well, and especially the lives of our young people. I can remember a day back in, I think it was 2008, I was doing traffic court. There was a high school senior in front of me. I think she was probably 17 or 18, and she was there on a violation for talking on her cell phone while driving. She had happened to be doing that as a police officer pulled up next to her and then pulled her over. Timing wasn't necessarily the best. She recommended, the police officer recommended that she attend the high-risk driving class, which is a class that we have in Multnomah County that we offer through the trauma nurses at Legacy Emmanuel Hospital. And I thought that that was a good resolution also. So while the clerk was filling out the paperwork, I had a few moments, and I tried, as I sometimes do, sometimes more successfully than others, to use that period for perhaps a little bit of education and things for the person who was there to give them some perspective. And so I said to her, you know, there are some people in this room who can remember a time when you got into a car, you were out of touch with everyone in the world except for the people who were in that vehicle with you. I can't remember her name or anything about her, but I can still remember that for about a second and a half, I got this look on her face that said, oh, come on, old man, who's going to believe that? And then it was like a light bulb went off, and oh yeah, maybe I did hear about that. And you know, for those of us who grew up in a time, and I see some people out there with hair nearly the same color as mine, so I know that you did. You know, for those of us who grew up in a time, that was the case. You know, you got in a car, and if you were there all alone, then you listened to the radio. Or maybe as technology advanced, the 8-track tapes that some of us had. You know, or if you were in the car with one or two other people, then you could have a conversation with them. You know, and it was the same at our homes. If you weren't home, when I was growing up back in the 60s, if you weren't home and somebody called, the phone rang for as long as they wanted it to ring, and they hung up. You know, you didn't have an answering machine or voicemail at those times. It was, you know, but it was a good reminder to me, and it still is as I remember that moment with in court that day, that the young people today are growing up in an entirely different world than many of us in this room did. I'm sure that that young lady could barely, if at all, remember a time when there weren't cell phones around. They didn't work as well, perhaps, as they did, you know, earlier. But you know, I can remember back in the early '90s when I was working at a law firm in Pittsburgh. When you became partner, you got a car phone, and that was one of your benefits or whatever of becoming a partner in that law firm. People could contact you 24 hours a day. You know what a great reward. But that was you know, the beginning of the cell phone era. And based on her age, she probably had never really lived in a time when you didn't always have the ability to communicate with anyone at any time. But I think a lot of times for those young people, the dangers of communicating with anyone at any time, especially when you're doing something as important as driving, has not always come to the forefront. They don't always get that message. And that's why Oregon Impact is so important, I think, for the work that they do. There's a variety of programs that Oregon Impact does that are directed toward young people and their parents about the dangers of not just impaired driving, but distracted driving. The Operation Prom Night, the Mobile Educational Crash Car Trailer, the Sydney, the Simulated Impaired Driving Experience. Those are all programs that are facilitated by Oregon Impact that help keep our young people and really anyone else who is sharing the road with our young people at a particular moment safe. There are clinics on the proper use of child passenger seats, babies' car seats, that keep even our youngest people safe. These programs not only reach out to the young people, but they reach out to the parents so the parents can begin a conversation, because that's where it's important, that the parents begin a conversation with the young people. I think that probably, if not after every Victims Impact panel that I moderate, but I would say 11 out of 12 during the year that I moderate, somebody walks up to me at the end and says, they should make this required for everybody who's about to get a driver's license. And I say, I agree. And maybe someday that will happen. And maybe someday that will happen to the extent that people will actually make it happen, and it will be in all of our schools. But none of what happens now could happen without our volunteers. It's really the Oregon Impact volunteers that are the heart of this organization. There is no way that Oregon Impact could reach all the folks that we do without the help of our safety partners and our volunteers. We are so appreciative for their support because it takes many volunteers to run each Victims Impact panel, as well as any other event that Oregon Impact runs. These folks volunteer at our schools, they volunteer in our community, they speak, they help administer the panels, the car seat fittings. Without them, none of this important work could take place. Now, before I introduce our main speaker, I'd like to say a few words about the DUI panels, because that's the part of Oregon Impact that I'm most familiar with on a regular basis. And those words that I'd like to say about our volunteers are, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how our speakers get up there month after month and share the stories that they do. As I remind the people who are attending the panels, who are court ordered to be there, as I remind them before the start of every panel, these folks are sharing some of the darkest and most tragic days of their lives. Days that, for very good reasons, we'd all like to forget. Stories about the death of a husband, the death of a son, the death of a daughter. Stories about long-term traumatic brain injury or lifetime paralysis, all of which were caused by someone's choice to drive under the influence of intoxicants or drive impaired in some other way. I don't know how they share those stories, but they do. And they share those stories in the hope that when the people who are court ordered to be there hear those stories, that they'll change their behavior, that they'll make some decisions that maybe that wasn't the best decision that I made that night, and I'm going to make a better one the next time that I get in the car. Now, we don't get through to everybody. While most of our participants in the Victims Impact panels are there in the diversion program, we also have many that are attending for their second or third or more time. Now, for those of you who don't know, the diversion program, the DUI diversion program, is a statutorily set up program where anyone who is charged with their first charge of driving under the influence of intoxicants, or actually now their first one in 15 years, they can go through the diversion program, and if they are successful at the end of that DUI charge is dismissed from their record. They don't have the conviction for driving under the influence of intoxicants. If they don't successfully complete the program, though, then they do have the conviction. And while many times there are many crimes with which people can be charged that can be expunged, which means taken off your record after a certain period of time, a conviction for driving under the influence of intoxicants under the current law can never be expunged. So that's going to be on your driving record and on your criminal record for the rest of your life as the law currently exists. If you are convicted of assault in the 4th degree, you can probably have that expunged in many cases. If you're convicted of shoplifting and many crimes like that, you can have that expunged after periods of time. But for driving under the influence of intoxicants, you can't. And that's why the diversion program, I think, is there. I think that's why the legislature put it there well over 20 years ago now, to give people the opportunity to make one mistake, not cause any real damage, and learn from that mistake and then never make it again. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. We do have people at the end of every session fill out an anonymous survey. They have to hand in that survey in order to get their certificate, and they need the certificate in order to prove that they have completed that part of the diversion program or their probation. Now, one of the Multnomah County surveys, when asked what impact the panel would have on their future choices, the person wrote, "It'll have a positive impact, but I really don't drive that drunk." Now, unfortunately, I expect that that person is going to be back. I only hope that that person comes back before they cause the kind of tragedy that we hear about in these victims' impact panels. Now, when I sentence offenders for their second or greater incident of driving under the influence of intoxicants, I often order that in addition to attending the victims' impact panel, and that is always ordered, that is ordered by law that in every county that has a victims' impact panel, the court must order the person to attend that. And I think that's obviously a great part of the law. But I often, if it's their second or more time, my thought is, well, you didn't get it the first time. So I want to try to make sure that you get it the second time. So I often order that in addition to attending it within 30 days of going there, they have to submit to me a 1,000-word essay on what they learned at the panel and how it's going to affect their choices in the future. Now, I tell them that I don't grade them on their grammar, on their punctuation, or on their spelling. And I can tell you, believe me, it's a really good thing that I don't. It's amazing sometimes what I see or don't see. But I tell them that I do look for sincerity and some insight. I like the idea of the essays because it forces someone to not just check off the box as a condition of their diversion or probation that, yeah, I went to the victims panel, I sat there for 2 hours, but it forces them to think about it. It forces them to remember what our speakers take the time to tell them about what the real consequences are of driving under the influence of intoxicants. Usually when I tell someone that they're doing a 1,000-word essay, I get the most visual reaction at that point of any other part of the sentence. I actually did have someone ask me a couple of years ago if he could do a couple of extra days in jail instead of having to write the essay. I told him no. I said, you know, the jail time is what it is. If you don't write the essay, then you'll be doing a few extra days in jail probably. But you have to write the essay. You know, I just got one a few days ago from Multnomah County, and the essay was titled "The Gift of Choice," and that was the message that Joan Miller, one of our speakers, gives about the gift of choice. Joan suffered severe traumatic brain injury in a crash a number of years ago. And at every panel, whether it's in Multnomah County or Clackamas County, when Joan gets up to speak, I have to hold out my hand and help her up the 2 stairs up onto the stage because that's what happened to her. Was it 1998, Joan? 99. Okay. 1999. You know, Joan's not supposed to be with us today, but she is, and she speaks, and like so many of our other volunteers, you know, they speak with a lot of emotion and with a lot of hardship to get there. And so I see those in the essays that, yeah, somebody got it. Now, whether people do an essay or not, I have no doubt that the impact panels save lives. I don't know of any way to quantify it. I Statistics was not my strong suit when I was in college. So I have no idea how anyone could ever construct a method that could quantify how many lives the victims' impact panels have saved. Because we'll never know who made the decision on a particular night based on what they heard in one of these panels, that they weren't going to drive, or they weren't going to drink, or they certainly weren't going to drive if they had been drinking. And we'll never know who might have been coming along in the opposite direction if that person had made that decision, when the drunk driver might have swerved across the center line or swerved across the fog line. So we'll never know whose lives were saved. But I have no doubt, both the feeling in my gut and the feeling in my heart, that there are people who are alive today, and I don't know if it's in the dozens or hundreds or thousands, but I think it grows every day. There are people who are alive today because our volunteers had the courage to stand up in front of over 100 or so other people and share their experience and touch that life that eventually would have saved a life down the road. And that's why I say, I don't know how they do it, but I'm very grateful that they do, because it does save lives. This afternoon, we're going to hear from one of our volunteers, Carrie Higgins, who is going to share her story. And I think that most of you are probably going to recognize good parts of that story. Carrie, thank you for being willing to come up here and share your story. So, ladies and gentlemen, Carrie Higgins.
So on June 8th, 2014, our world turned upside down when Hallie and I were making dinner at home and realized that the helicopters that were flying above us were for our Maddie. On June 9th, 24-hour agonizing hours later, the doctors declared Maddie brain dead. We kept her alive for 24 hours so that she could donate organs and save 5 other lives. Maddie was 17 and was 3 days short of completing her junior year in high school. The day before her accident, she was just voted into the Oregon, softball? First team All-State softball, which was a huge goal of hers. We announced that at her funeral 5 days later. So I'm here as a mother who grieves for 2 beautiful girls, both who had their lives stolen far too soon. I mourn daily for Maddie. Losing my firstborn suddenly and so tragically was heartbreaking and will forever leave open wounds in our hearts and souls. My only solace is knowing that she now lives in a better place and experiences eternal perfection. I also mourn the innocence, happiness, and carefree life that my younger daughter Hallie once had, and she deserved to continue to have. I ache as I watch her struggle to find her smile and that deep, loud, contagious belly laugh that she's always been known for, as she attempts to manage the pain, confusion, loneliness, and heartache that she feels without having her big sister by her side. She is now forced to navigate being thrust into only childhood. This is my firstborn. Just a few more pictures here. When it was the 3 of us. It was always supposed to be the 3 of us. So Maddie lost her life at the hands of a reckless driver. She was riding as a passenger with an 18-year-old young man that was well known in our community for his need for speed. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person. A good person, but a person who chose to drive so fast down a steep rural road at an estimated 90 miles per hour that his car was sheared in half after wrapping around a telephone pole. Sadly, Maddie and I were in the midst of a tough love moment when her accident occurred. Like many teenagers, Maddie battled for freedom and independence, and she didn't always embrace my guidance, discipline, strict ground rules, or other loving, nurturing reasons behind my decisions, which were to keep her safe, protected, and unharmed. In fact, shortly before the accident occurred, Maddie and I had a disagreement about some of our recent choices and friends, unmet scholastic goals, and other questionable decisions. During this disagreement, I took away Maddie's keys, her car, and ultimately revoked her license and sent it back to the DMV because I wasn't convinced that she should be behind the wheel. My words to Maddie were, I don't want to provide you with a weapon wherein your poor choices behind the wheel could kill you or kill someone else. I'm doing this because I love you. I don't know what else to do. I was, and I didn't know what else to do. This disagreement resulted in a dramatic mother-daughter showdown where Maddie's final words to me were, leave me alone, you're dead to me. My last words to Maddie were, I love you, baby. To lose Maddie so suddenly and violently in the midst of this unresolved tough love moment creates deeply complicated, heartbreaking grief. So our mission here is simple, maybe selfish, but I can't make excuses for that. I'm here to stay, and I'm that mom. I've always fought for my girls. Not the perfect mom, by any means, but I do love big, and I don't think my girls will ever question if I had their back. My mom, I'm sure they would say my mom has my back. I did, I do, and I always will, life or death. So I'm here to help save lives by raising awareness on the issue of reckless, distracted, and impaired driving, because I know it's important to educate our communities and teens on the importance of making good decisions. I also know that it starts with us as parents. I actually attended the Multnomah County high-risk driving class at Legacy Emmanuel Hospital about 3 years ago because I didn't always make good decisions behind the car. I'm always that distracted mom, you know, who was trying to get that one last text in or, you know, putting my mascara on, which I'm sure I was doing when I got pulled over. And so I have guilt. I wasn't the best role model. I remember that class so vividly when a lady introduced us to her son. I thought, oh my God, finally, a good story. And she brought out his ashes in an urn, and I'll never forget that. And I remember going home and talking to my girls about it and being very, very impacted. And I did change my behaviors. I'm not sure that I ever talked to my kids about the importance of being a good passenger and being that second set of eyes, and when to speak up when things start going wrong, and how to put your phone down and be that co-pilot. It wasn't until after this accident that I realized that reckless and distracted driving were the #1 cause of death for teens 15 to 19. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I've also been disappointed that it's not mandatory part of education and curriculum. I think back to when I was young and the whole anti-smoking campaign of the 70s, and I remember coming home and telling my parents they were gonna die if they kept smoking. And I mean, they didn't know, they didn't know, everyone smoked. And we educated them. We made a change. I mean, the smoking rates have obviously declined huge, but I just remember that in second grade, talking to my parents about smoking. Wow, that was a long ways away from when I was ever gonna smoke, and I never did. But I feel like the same thing should be happening in our schools way before driving age. So, again, I'm just here as a mom. We're here as a duo here, just to spread. We'll work with anybody. We'll talk to anybody. We have just a full-time student. I have a full-time job. But gosh, you know what? This is about the only thing that I am passionate about, because I know that it can create impact. I know that we can help, even if it's saving one life. I feel like Maddie would be proud of us, and we would keep her alive with us. So I found Oregon Impact shortly after Maddie's accident, when I began to search for information, assistance, just anything that made sense. And I was so desperate to stop the statistics and to stop this from happening. I didn't know where to begin. And I had people calling me wanting to see the car. I didn't know. I guess somebody put me in contact, I think, with Janelle and wanted to try and get the car in a trailer so that these kids could see the impact, the devastation of this sheared car. And I think that was how I initially made the contact. And then I attended one of their impact panels just to kind of listen to some of the stories and talk a little bit more about trying to become involved and seeing if there's anything we could do to help. And they've been amazing. They've supported our efforts. We're sort of starting this grassroots Stay Alive for 5. And again, 5, it's not about Maddie. It's about the 5 lives. It's about stopping this. But it's got to do something. And we know that we can, if we talk to teens. I mean, Hallie, this is our demographic, right? This is. We just want to get the word out there and stay alive for 5, drive for 5. Just if everyone talks to 5 people, we can all make a difference if we just stop this tragedy. So we've kind of called this the power of 5, and we want to join the communities. You know, we have seen a community divide in Westland. You know, between families. Families have experienced divorces. Friendships have been severed. There's the driver. Some people feel like the driver was this horrible person, and that he's. We just want to stop that. We just want to stop. We're trying to come together and bring the communities back together and join with. You know, this community, Oregon City, Westland, everybody is all joined together to see what we can do and to stop this. 5 is enough. So this is a tough time. Obviously, we all know that the most fatalities occur on the roads between May and August. We're going to speak to several schools in the next couple of weeks, going to Southern Oregon a couple times. I have a lot of people calling me wanting us to come talk, and we'll, like I said, we'll talk to anybody, you know, if the time allows. But we couldn't do it without Oregon Impact, and we couldn't do it without Janelle being responsive to my tearful calls. They've actually sponsored Hallie as well for a driving class. She unfortunately made a poor decision on Thanksgiving night to have a friend in the car before her graduated licensing was up. It was Thanksgiving night, and I didn't feel like going Black Friday shopping. So she wanted to go with a friend, and she got pulled over. And she got a ticket. She got 2 tickets. We're not perfect. We're far from perfect. We all need to work together, and I'm just grateful for Oregon Impact for providing us some opportunities to heal by speaking and to learn by educating. So, thank you.
I think now you understand why I started off by saying I don't know how they do it. And that goes for all of our volunteers who speak at these panels. I don't know how they do it, but I think you can also see why it is so important that they do, and why I believe that these panels save lives. Before I introduce the next person I want to introduce, there was one group of folks that I neglected to have recognized earlier, and I realized it, or remembered it when I saw one of the pictures. And some of our speakers mentioned these folks, and they are the police and firefighters who respond to these crashes, who see things that most of us never have to see. But they respond, and they do it in a professional and caring manner to do their best to take care of the people who are involved in those crashes, no matter what caused it. So I would like to ask all of our police and firefighters and folks from AMR and other emergency responders to please stand up and be recognized. Thank you all, because it is the work that you do is vitally important to all of us. And you know, very often it is that police car that someone sees that makes them put down the cell phone or something like that. And you know, or you know, I followed an ambulance down 99 this morning coming in from Portland. You know, and I thought, I wonder who's in that. I wonder if they're going to get somebody, or if there's somebody already in there now. And I wonder if that was a car crash that caused them to be there. And I think it made me, and hopefully all of the other people who were on the road at that time, maybe drive just a little bit safer for that time frame. So these stories, you know, could perhaps sometime end. I'm very happy to introduce right now a person who I don't know how she does everything that she does. I don't know where she gets the energy or where she finds those extra 8 hours in a day that the rest of us don't, you know, to turn every day into a 32-hour day, or instead of a 24-hour day. But the executive director of Oregon Impact, Janelle Lawrence.
Well, clearly I'm not that bright because I scheduled myself after Carrie, and I'm not quite back together yet. Darn it. So it's time to start the conversation about marijuana now that it's coming shortly. So we wanted to address a little bit about that today. And new information is literally coming out every day. So I would like to say that this is this week's information, and things could change as more research is done, but this is where we are now. So this is your brain. We kind of know what alcohol does to our brain by now. And now we're working on trying to figure out what marijuana does to that same brain. Motor vehicle crashes attributed to alcohol-impaired drivers annually impose more than an estimated $37 billion in costs each year. But there are hundreds of drugs that also affect the central nervous system, processing capability, and diminish the skills that persons need to handle traffic safely, and marijuana is just one of them. Over the last 2 decades, numerous states have enacted laws permitting marijuana to be used for medical treatment, and some, like Oregon, will soon permit its recreational use. These laws have raised a host of legal and public policy issues. And most of the discussion and most all the litigation so far has involved the respective roles of state and federal government and how each one may or should deal with this subject. One issue that has received little attention in the legal community is the risk that medical and recreational marijuana laws will pose to highway traffic safety. Police officers have used breathalyzers since they first became available because they're portable, easily and quickly administered, non-invasive, and perhaps most importantly, reliable. The same alcohol is present in every alcoholic beverage, only the quantity and flavor additives differ. So breathing test is the standard means for measuring alcohol-induced intoxication because alcohol is excreted in part through the lung. We have established a straight-line correlation between the presence of a particular blood alcohol level and the impairment that it causes. But marijuana is not the same. There's no device comparable to a breathalyzer to identify marijuana intoxication. By contrast, there are a host of factors that affect how the drug works within your system. It's related to your body weight and composition, the distribution, your metabolism, and the accumulation of any drug in your system and how it's absorbed. In addition, THC, which is in cannabis that creates that, varies so much now. Somebody said to me, "This ain't your daddy's Mary Jane," and that would be the truth. It's been grown and hybrid and in so many things now that there's not really a way to say, well, this 1.5 ounces of hard liquor, we know what's in that. We'd never be able to do that with marijuana. So on the tests on driving, these were the skills that it affected while somebody's driving. Marijuana users overestimate the drug's effect and compensate by driving more slowly, passing less frequently, and spacing their cars further apart, which on the onset sounded pretty good. However, since they don't have any perception of time or space, we're right back where we started. So the effects of alcohol on driving, some are a bit the same, some are a little different. Drivers teens with alcohol seem to underestimate the effect of alcohol and engage in risky behaviors such as driving faster and more aggressively. So basically disconnect something in your brain. And this is what was the most worrisome I found when I started doing my research. The folks that are drinking and smoking marijuana. The things that affect folks that are drinking alcohol and marijuana together, this would be everything that's working against them when they're behind the wheel. So basically that somebody that's intoxicated at a 0.05 level, by the time they've added marijuana to that, they're way over the legal limit in the way they drive. So this piece is very serious, especially when we're talking to our kids and our family members. Marijuana is more common in young people because they have easier access to it, and because young drivers have the disappropriate share of traffic crashes based on their inexperience. So now it's what do we do? And that's going to be about having conversations, open conversations at home about marijuana use. I left you a little ball of yarn on your tables. That's hopefully your reminder to take with you to talk to your kids and your grandkids and your families about marijuana and the disconnect that can happen with just one of those threads break, because that's what's happening in your brain. Passengers have to be able to speak up, and your kids need to know how to speak up, because I can't tell you how many crashes are responded to where the driver's just fine and it's that passenger that's hurt. It just happens over and over and over, and they're just not empowered enough to speak up and make sure that they're not in that vehicle. And we have to do what we expect our kids to do. If we don't give them a good example, they surely don't have one to follow. Now, my favorite part of today is I get to thank people. So this is my one opportunity, I'm taking it. So because of these folks up here on the screen, we have had car seat fittings for infants and children. We brought speakers to schools in the community. We've had our crash car trailer all over the state, along with all of our educational tools. And I am truly blessed to have all the volunteers and safety partners that I do. I did want to point out that I rarely say anything that doesn't go with, I'm in partnership with American Medical Response, because they are constantly looking out for us and doing great things for us. And I thank you so much for everything you do. It's great having you as a partner. Yeah. Also, Amber and Yvonne. There's Amber back there. Just for a second. Thank you. Wave. They do incredible amounts of work in our office and are very passionate, besides great workers, about our cause, and I'm thankful that I get to work with them every day. So I have a couple awards to give out. My first being for one of our volunteers. This person suffered a traumatic brain injury. And you wouldn't know it, because if she wants to do something, just get out of her way. It's going to happen. But she dedicates her extra time to making sure that we are well stocked with prizes at our golf tournament, so that we can just raise more funds to get to more kids. So if you get a call and ask for a donation, just say yes, because she's going to call you back if you say no. And that would be for Joan Miller. Because of Joan's work, she's raised thousands of dollars for Oregon Impact that goes directly out to doing programs for our kids.
Mothers and fathers shouldn't bury their kids. I'll do anything.
I'll remember that.
Yeah. Thank you. This is so very cool.
Thank you. That is somebody that is in support and partnership with me all the time. Some days, weeks get a little long, especially when you lose kid after kid after kid. And she's the person I call and get to vent with, and gives me support and great ideas for Oregon Impact. And that is Patty McMillan. That's why we had you sit in the back, so you had to make the long walk up to the front. Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce from our board Brad Hilliard, and he is also with State Farm.
Well, thank you very much, Janelle, and thank you everyone for coming out today and taking time out of your schedules to just to talk about this and to learn about this. I wanted to just take a quick moment to share my personal story, my personal experience as to why Oregon Impact is important to me. I've been involved with the organization for a little over 5 years within my role at State Farm now. When I was a senior in high school, I lost one of my very best friends to a car accident the night after prom. And what I can tell you, you can tell that wasn't yesterday, but it was about 20 years ago. And what I can tell you is that experience stays with you. And I feel it. I was very close to their family, and I've seen how that has affected his sister. I've seen how it's affected his parents. I've seen and experienced how it's affected his twin brother. We've had conversations where he tells me that he can't look in the mirror without remembering, and it's that was 20 years ago. So these accidents they cause a ripple effect, and that doesn't go away. The only thing that can stop that ripple effect is to prevent it from ever happening. Car accidents are the #1 killer of teens and young adults. It's the #1 killer. If this was a disease of some kind, it would be a national epidemic. People would be talking about it every day. People would be calling you for donations every day to find a cure for this disease. But it's looked at as a social issue, and unfortunately it's not. This is a very serious health risk, and it's something that's not going away unless we do something about it, but that's the good news. Unlike some of these diseases and things that don't have a cure, there is a cure for this, and it's right here in this room. It's right here, and it starts with all of us. Now, I am up here to give an ask today, and so that's what I'm going to do, but I'm going to ask for two things. The first thing I want to ask to do is that all of us in this room be the driver that we want our kids to be. Whether your child is 6 or 16, they're taking notes and they're watching what we're doing behind the wheel. So as you leave today, as your kids are in the car with you, be the one that ignores that phone when it goes off. Show them what it's like to not pick up your phone when you're at a red light. Put the phone away. Let them know what it is, what that is, what that's like to do that. Let them see that, because whether our kids want to admit it or not, they emulate what we do. I can, just a funny side note. I remember when I was a kid, watching my dad drive down the road, one hand on the steering wheel, one arm out the window, has a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, And what was I doing? I was in the passenger seat with my toy Frisbee, my hand hanging out the window, and what some of you will probably remember, the candy cigarettes hanging out of my mouth. So it was, we emulate those things, we copy those things, and it goes on. So be the driver you want your kids to be. The second thing I want you to do is to please take time right now and consider how you can support Oregon Impact. Oregon Impact's mission is to end impaired and distracted driving. They are looking to end it, not just curb the statistic, but put an end to it. And we can all help them do that. I've been with this organization. I've seen what they do. Oregon Impact touches 18,000 students each year and countless Oregonians. But they can do more, and they want to do more, and they can with our help. And so that's why I'm asking you to please consider how you can do that. Their programs, their school programs, I've seen them. They're very educational. They're very informative. But most importantly, they're life-saving. And they're saving lives. And they're doing their part to save lives in Oregon. And that's what I want to see us help them do. Save our kids' lives. Because that's what we're all here to try to do. So please take some time today as we're wrapping up. All of you have your handy name tags so you can get to know each other. On the inside of that is some information on how you can give. Please consider how you can do that, and please take time to just really think about that today. And so I guess just to conclude, just remember the 2 asks I give you. Be the driver you want your kids to be. Keep that in mind as you're heading out, and please think how you can do what you can to really support and embrace this organization and help us reach not only 18,000 kids, but 20, 30, 40, even 50,000 kids. Help us to get out to all over Oregon and really start making a difference on these roadways. So thank you very much for your time, and please consider how you can give.
I'd like to introduce from State Farm Public Affairs, Daniel Losk.
And I'm going to introduce a local State Farm agent, Melissa Miller, and we have a presentation for you today.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. So as you mentioned, my name is Melissa Miller. I'm a local agent here, and I'm also joined with some of my fellow peers and their team members, and so I'd like to ask them to actually join me up here next to the stage as well, as we have a special presentation to make. So if you guys could join me. So thank you for inviting us here today. This event underscores the importance that having that conversation, the collaboration and the education that's very important to today's topic and how it impacts our young adults and the Oregon drivers. State Farm agents live and work in the community that they serve. Our work as an advocate for auto and home safety, disaster preparedness, and education will continue to be the center of being there for our customers and communities. It is our pleasure today to award a 2015 State Farm Good Neighbor Citizenship Company grant in the amount of $36,000 to Oregon Impact. We know that this grant will assist in continuing Oregon Impact's mission of providing educational experiences to end impaired and distracted driving across the state. Thank you, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. And if you will take your letters with you that you wanted to sign out the front, Amber or Yvonne will grab those from you. Thank you so much for being here today.